Have you ever watched an avoidant partner go from present to gone in seconds? One moment they're right there with you, engaged and connected, and the next moment you can practically see them building walls in real time. Their eyes glaze over, their body language shifts, and suddenly the person who was just laughing with you feels like a stranger. These moments don't happen randomly. Avoidants have specific triggers that activate their flight response faster than you can blink. Understanding these triggers isn't about being overly careful around them. It's about recognizing what sends them running so you can approach situations differently and actually keep them present instead of watching them disappear. Most people make the mistake of trying harder when they see an avoidant starting to withdraw. They chase, they explain, they try to fix whatever just happened, but the more you pursue, the faster they run. The key is learning to disarm these triggers before they fully activate, or knowing how to respond when you accidentally hit one. What makes these triggers so powerful is that they operate below the conscious level. An avoidant might not even realize why they suddenly feel the need to create distance, or why their chest tightens when certain topics come up. Their nervous system is responding to perceived threats based on past experiences, not current reality. This automatic response system developed for good reasons. Most avoidants learned early that certain situations led to emotional overwhelm, criticism, rejection, or loss of autonomy. Their brain filed these experiences away as dangerous and created instant alarm systems to help them avoid similar situations in the future. The challenge is that these protective mechanisms often get triggered in situations that aren't actually dangerous. When you express love, their brain might interpret it as pressure. When you want to plan a future together, their system might read it as loss of freedom. When you need to have a serious conversation, their nervous system might prepare for attack. Understanding this can help you approach triggering situations with more compassion and strategy. You're not dealing with someone who's trying to hurt you or push you away on purpose. You're dealing with someone whose protective system is working overtime to keep them safe from perceived threats. The intensity of these triggers can vary dramatically based on their current stress levels, how safe they feel in the relationship overall, and what else is happening in their life. An avoidant who's dealing with work stress, family issues, or health concerns might be more easily triggered than usual. Their emotional bandwidth is already stretched thin, so situations that normally wouldn't bother them suddenly feel overwhelming. This is why timing matters so much when dealing with avoidant triggers. The same conversation that goes smoothly on a relaxed Sunday afternoon might send them running if attempted during a stressful week. Learning to read their overall emotional state can help you choose when to approach sensitive topics and when to give them space to regulate first. Many avoidants also experience what could be called trigger stacking, where multiple small triggers build up throughout the day or week until they reach a breaking point. Maybe you mentioned future plans in the morning, had an emotional conversation at lunch, and then wanted to define the relationship in the evening. Each individual trigger might have been manageable, but together they created an overwhelming need to escape. Recognizing trigger stacking can help you space out potentially activating conversations and experiences. Instead of addressing everything at once, you can spread things out over time, allowing their nervous system to reset between potentially challenging interactions. You're about to discover the 7 most powerful triggers that make avoidance run, and more importantly, exactly how to disarm them quickly before you lose them to their own defense mechanisms. The first trigger that sends avoidance running happens the moment those 4 words leave your mouth. We need to talk. To you, this might seem like a normal request for communication. To an avoidant, it sounds like a warning siren. Their brain immediately starts preparing for emotional overwhelm, criticism, demands they can't meet, or conversations they don't know how to navigate. Why does this trigger them so intensely? Because in their experience, we need to talk conversations rarely end well. They've learned that these words usually precede emotional intensity they're not equipped to handle, requests for vulnerability they're not ready to give, or discussions about relationship issues they'd rather avoid entirely. The moment you say these words, you can watch their nervous system activate. They might suddenly remember something urgent they need to do, their phone might become incredibly interesting, or they might physically start moving toward the door. Their body is literally preparing to escape before the conversation even begins. What makes this trigger even more powerful is the anticipation it creates. The gap between "we need to talk" and the actual conversation gives their anxiety time to build. They start imagining worst-case scenarios, rehearsing defensive responses, or planning their emotional exit strategy. Some avoidants will even create conflict or pick fights as a way to avoid the dreaded "we need to talk" conversation. They'd rather deal with anger or frustration than face the vulnerability that serious conversations require. This self-sabotage often confuses partners who can't understand why bringing up the need for communication creates more problems instead of solving them. How do you disarm this trigger fast? Skip the ominous setup entirely. Instead of saying "we need to talk," just start talking about what you actually want to discuss. If you need to address something specific, be direct and immediate. Say something like, "I felt hurt when this happened earlier," instead of building up the suspense with a conversation announcement. If you absolutely must prepare them for a serious conversation, give them specifics and reassurance at the same time. Try something like, "I'd like to talk about our weekend plans, and I want you to know this isn't about anything being wrong." This tells them exactly what to expect and removes the fear of unknown emotional territory. Another approach is to give them some control over the timing. Instead of demanding immediate conversation, you might say, "There's something I'd like to discuss with you. When would be a good time for you?" This reduces the feeling of being ambushed and gives them a sense of agency in the situation. You can also try what I call the soft entry approach. Instead of making it sound like a formal relationship meeting, you might say something like, "I've been thinking about something and would love to hear your thoughts." This frames the conversation as collaborative rather than confrontational. Moving on to the second major trigger that makes avoidance disappear, any pressure around future planning or commitment. This shows up when you start talking about moving in together, meeting each other's families, exclusive dating, or even just making plans more than a few weeks out. The moment avoidants feel like the relationship is moving towards serious territory, their escape route starts looking very appealing. Future planning triggers avoidance because it forces them to confront the possibility of losing their independence. When you talk about shared futures, they hear loss of freedom, increased expectations, and emotional demands they might not be able to meet. Their brain starts calculating all the ways this could trap them or disappoint you. The fear isn't just about commitment itself, it's about the unknown demands that commitment might bring. They worry about losing themselves in the relationship, about having to meet expectations they can't sustain, or about disappointing someone they care about when they inevitably need space or independence. This trigger often intensifies when avoidants feel like the relationship is progressing faster than their emotional readiness. While you might be excited about the natural progression toward deeper commitment, they might be panicking about keeping up with expectations they never agreed to meet. You'll know you've hit this trigger when they suddenly become vague about availability, start mentioning how busy they are, or begin talking about all the uncertainty in their life right now. They might also deflect by turning the conversation to immediate surface-level topics or by suddenly becoming very focused on their individual goals and interests. Some avoidants will even sabotage good relationships when future planning becomes too intense. They'd rather end things on their own terms than feel trapped in a commitment they're not ready for. This self-sabotage often looks like picking fights, becoming distant, or suddenly finding flaws in the relationship that didn't bother them before. The commitment trigger can also be activated by well-meaning friends and family who ask questions about the relationship's future. When other people start inquiring about marriage, moving in together, or long-term plans, it can create pressure that the avoidant never directly agreed to face. To disarm this trigger quickly, remove the pressure and timeline. Instead of talking about when you'll move in together, talk about what kind of living situation makes each of you happy. Instead of pushing for exclusivity, focus on enjoying what you have right now. Make it clear that you're not trying to lock them into anything, you're just sharing thoughts or dreams without expectation. When you do want to discuss future possibilities, frame them as options rather than plans. Say something like, "I've been thinking it might be fun to take a trip together sometime, but no pressure," instead of, "We should plan a vacation for next month." This lets them engage with future possibilities without feeling trapped by them. You can also acknowledge their need for independence directly. Something like, "I love spending time with you, and I also want you to feel free to be yourself and maintain your own life." can be incredibly disarming for someone who fears losing themselves in a relationship. Try what I call the no-pressure exploration approach. Instead of making statements about what you want to happen, ask questions about what they envision or what feels good to them. This gives them control over the direction and pace of future planning discussions. The third trigger that sends avoidance running is emotional intensity, especially when it comes in the form of tears, raised voices, or passionate expressions of feeling. Avoidants are often overwhelmed by high emotional energy, whether it's positive or negative. When emotions get intense, their instinct is to find the nearest emotional exit. This trigger activates because avoidants never learned healthy ways to navigate emotional intensity. If their family dealt with emotions through explosion, suppression, or complete avoidance, they don't have the tools to stay present when feelings get big. Intense emotions feel dangerous to them, like something that could spiral out of control. Many avoidants also struggle with what's called emotional contagion. They absorb the emotional energy of people around them without knowing how to filter or process it. When you're highly emotional, they might start feeling overwhelmed by emotions that aren't even their own. The emotional intensity trigger is particularly challenging because it can be activated by positive emotions too. Extreme joy, excitement, or love can feel just as overwhelming as anger or sadness. This means that even happy, celebratory moments can sometimes send an avoidant running if the emotional energy gets too high. This trigger also tends to compound itself. The more emotional you become about their withdrawal, the more they need to withdraw to escape the intensity. It creates a cycle where your natural response to their distancing actually reinforces their need to create more distance. You'll see this trigger hit when they shut down during emotional conversations, suddenly become very rational and detached, or physically remove themselves from situations where feelings are running high. They might also become dismissive of emotions, treating them like inconvenient obstacles rather than important information. Some avoidants will try to redirect emotional intensity by making jokes, changing the subject to something practical, or even creating physical distractions. They're not being insensitive on purpose. They're trying to manage overwhelming emotional energy in the only way they know how. The fast disarm here is to regulate your own emotional intensity before trying to engage with them. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings, but it does mean finding ways to communicate what you need without overwhelming their capacity to receive it. Take deep breaths, lower your voice, and focus on one specific thing rather than everything you're feeling all at once. If you're already in an emotionally intense moment, try pausing and saying something like, "I can see this is a lot right now. Can we take a breath and slow this down?" This gives them permission to stay present instead of feeling like they need to escape the emotional intensity. You can also try what I call emotional portioning, breaking down big feelings into smaller, more manageable pieces. Instead of expressing everything you're feeling at once, share one emotion at a time and give them space to process before moving to the next feeling. Now we come to the fourth trigger that makes avoidance bolt: the relationship-defining conversation. Questions like, "What are we?" or "Where is this going?" or "How do you feel about me?" send most avoidants running for the hills. These questions force them to put words to feelings they might not understand yet and make commitments they're not ready to make. Relationship-defining conversations trigger avoidance because they require vulnerability and clarity about feelings that might still be developing. They also hate feeling pressured to make declarations before they're ready, and they fear saying the wrong thing or not feeling enough of the right emotions. This trigger is particularly powerful because it often comes at moments when the relationship is actually going well. You want to define things precisely because you're happy and want clarity about the future, but to an avoidant, your happiness and desire for definition can feel like pressure to reciprocate emotions they're not ready to name. When you hit this trigger, they'll typically become evasive, give non-answers, or deflect back to you. They might say things like, "I don't know," or "I'm just taking things as they come," or "Why do we need to label everything?" Their goal is to avoid committing to any specific emotional state or relationship status. The relationship definition trigger often gets worse when there's a time pressure involved. If you're asking these questions because you need to make decisions about living situations, job opportunities, or other life choices, the added pressure of external deadlines can make their flight response even stronger. To disarm this trigger, stop asking them to define things and start paying attention to how they show up. Instead of asking, "Do you care about me?" Notice whether they make time for you, whether they're considerate of your feelings, whether they choose to spend their free time with you. Their actions will tell you more than their words ever could. If you absolutely need clarity about something specific, ask about behavior rather than feelings. Instead of, "How do you feel about me?" try, "Are you interested in continuing to see each other regularly?" This gives them concrete territory to navigate instead of abstract emotional concepts. The fifth trigger that sends avoidance running is social integration, meeting friends, family, or being introduced as more than just a casual acquaintance. Avoidants often prefer to keep different areas of their life separate, and introducing a romantic partner to their social world feels like crossing a significant boundary. Social integration triggers avoidance because it makes the relationship real and visible to others. Once other people know about you, they can't easily disappear if they get overwhelmed. It also opens them up to questions, opinions, and expectations from people in their life, which feels like additional pressure they're not ready to handle. You'll know you've triggered this when they become hesitant about attending social events together, make excuses about why it's not a good time to meet their friends or family, or seem uncomfortable when you're around people they know. They might also downplay the relationship when others are around, introducing you as a friend even when you're clearly more than that. The quick disarm is to remove the pressure and timeline around social integration. Don't push to meet their friends or family, and don't take it personally when they're not ready to introduce you to their world. Focus on building security in your one-on-one connection first. When social situations do arise naturally, make it easy for them by being low maintenance and independent. Don't cling to them at parties, don't demand their constant attention, and don't create situations where they feel responsible for managing your comfort around their people. The sixth trigger that makes avoidance flee is moving too fast physically or sexually, especially when it's combined with emotional intensity. While avoidants might be comfortable with physical intimacy, they can get overwhelmed when it feels like it's supposed to mean something significant or when it's happening faster than their emotional comfort zone can handle. Physical intimacy triggers avoidance when it feels like it comes with emotional expectations or when it's being used as a way to create deeper connection than they're ready for. They can separate physical and emotional intimacy pretty easily, but they get uncomfortable when others can't or won't make that same separation. This trigger shows up as them creating physical distance after intimate moments, seeming uncomfortable with post-intimacy closeness, or avoiding situations where physical intimacy might naturally occur. They might also become very casual or detached about physical connection, treating it like it doesn't mean anything significant. To disarm this trigger, follow their lead on physical intimacy and don't attach heavy emotional meaning to physical moments. Let physical connection be what it is without using it as proof of deeper emotional connection or as a way to push for more commitment in other areas of the relationship. Keep emotional intimacy and physical intimacy on separate tracks. Don't use physical closeness as a time to have deep emotional conversations, and don't interpret their physical availability as readiness for emotional vulnerability. Finally, we reach the seventh and perhaps most powerful trigger: expressing deep feelings, especially love, but also intense gratitude, overwhelming appreciation, or profound emotional connection. When you tell an avoidant how much they mean to you, how deeply you care, or how much you love them, their instinct is often to run in the opposite direction. Deep emotional expressions trigger avoidance because they create pressure to reciprocate feelings they might not be ready to acknowledge or express. They also fear disappointing you when they can't match your emotional intensity, and they worry about being responsible for emotions that feel bigger than what they can handle. You'll see this trigger when they become uncomfortable after you express strong feelings, when they deflect or change the subject, or when they start pulling away in the days following emotional declarations. They might also minimize what you said or act like it didn't happen. The fast disarm is to express your feelings without creating pressure for them to respond in kind. You can say, "I love spending time with you," instead of, "I love you and need to know how you feel about me." You can share your positive feelings without making them responsible for reciprocating or validating those feelings. When you do express deeper feelings, give them space to process without expecting an immediate response. Don't ask, Do you feel the same way? Or look for verbal confirmation. Let your expression stand on its own as information about your experience, not as a question that requires an answer. Understanding these triggers doesn't mean you have to be overly cautious or suppress your own needs and feelings. It means you can be strategic about how and when you approach certain topics, and you can respond skillfully when you accidentally activate their flight response. The most important thing to remember is that when an avoidant runs, chasing them only makes it worse. The fastest way to disarm any trigger is to give them space to come back down from their activated state while making it clear that you're not going anywhere and you're not angry about their reaction. Sometimes the best disarming technique is simply staying calm and present when they start to withdraw. Don't react to their reaction. Don't try to fix it immediately. Just remain steady and available while they work through their internal alarm system. The goal isn't to never trigger an avoidant. That's impossible if you want any kind of real relationship. The goal is to recognize when you've hit a trigger, respond in ways that help them feel safe, and gradually build their capacity to stay present even when their instinct is to run. Remember that these triggers exist for a reason. They developed as protection mechanisms, and they won't disappear overnight. But when you consistently respond to triggered avoidance with patience rather than pursuit, understanding rather than pressure, they often start to feel safer staying present for the very conversations and experiences that used to send them running. Have you noticed any of these triggers in your relationships with avoidant partners? Have you tried chasing when they run, only to watch them disappear faster? Share in the comments which triggers feel most familiar and what happened when you tried a different approach. If this helped you understand that the key to keeping avoidance close is knowing how to disarm their flight response, like this video and subscribe for more insights into navigating avoidant dynamics with skill instead of frustration. Thanks for watching.